The first song on my EP, called Detrimental, was one of the first songs that I made on FL Studio, actually. And it's a lot different now than it used to be. I've always been fond of the song, so I came back to it after like 2 years to revamp it. The song is meant to sound kind of exciting and adventurous. That's the idea I wanted to go for. There's this distorted, bubbly synth that kind of just goes between two different octaves, and I created the synth to add more variation in the texture of the chord progression because I thought it was a little empty, and I wanted to keep things a little more active so people wouldn't get bored. I would change the amount of distortion that would affect the synth depending on the parts. For more active parts, I increased the distortion to make it stand out and feel more like static among the other smoother parts. But for the calmer parts, I reduced the distortion so it didn't interfere with the purpose of it, and so you could still hear it easily, but it wasn't so grating. During the chorus, I panned it back and forth from left and right to add an atmospheric layer to the song during the chorus. And there's this nylon synth that happens in the chorus, and it's mainly an arpeggio to the main chord progression, but I thought it added a nice feeling to the chorus. It's harder than the rest of the instruments and more percussive, so it definitely stands out compared to all the pads and other synths. There's also this distorted bass guitar, and I didn't think that this song was meant to sound realistic in general, so in order to continue the thought process, I distorted the bass guitar to sound more like a saw wave synth, but sometimes it still had that plucking sound like you would with a guitar, so it definitely retained a bit of the original timbre. I made this part to add the feely part of the song, but I basically made a simpler variant of the piano part, retaining the root note of the chord with slight changes towards the end of each measure. For the main pad, I didn't have much knowledge about creating my own synthetic sounds, and because this was my first song, I was basically exploring the presets of the plugins, looking for something that I liked. I thought it was something that sounded very arcadey, kind of like what you would hear in an old video game, but it sounded smooth and less rugged than video games would. Being new to programming songs, I had these very iconic ideas of what synths were supposed to sound like, and I think I was heavily influenced by the 8-bit music. For the strings, I never really had an opportunity to add string parts to a song before, so I was really adamant in adding a part for the song. I love the elegance of string parts, and I think my love for those types of timbres has had a lot of influence on what music I make now. The drums are pretty straightforward, and I knew that it was fairly simple, but I was just excited to be making drums in the first place, so I didn't really care that much. I wanted some hats and cymbals that didn't have a lot of attack or that hitting feeling to them, and so I found this one hat that kind of feels like a wave on the ocean or something like that. I definitely wanted the sound, but I didn't want people to focus on it too much, so that it was easier to focus on the kick, snare, and the main melodies. The main purpose of the drums was to essentially drive the song to feel faster. The song is only about 100 beats per minute, so technically it's slower, but the drum parts make it feel faster paced. For the second verse, I left out the drums to have people focus on the movement of the melody, but as the verse progressed, I added more and more layers to the section that I felt like I needed the drums to add the final climax to the part, and I thought it turned out very well. The piano part is actually a melody that I came up a long time before I started making music on FL Studio, and so though I wanted to change the mistakes I had and the ideas, and so it's fairly different from what it used to be. I knew I kind of wanted to slightly make the song focus around the piano, and I think that's where it all kind of started with my liking to add piano parts to songs. And I thought this chord progression was actually really cool because it wasn't the same for all 4 measures. The chord progression was actually 8 measures, and so it was a lot different from other songs that I've made because it varied more for longer periods of times, and so I was really happy about how it turned out. For the drums, I also added all these other parts that weren't constantly playing, but just to add more atmosphere, I added these parts that sounded like gongs and kind of these stormy sounds, and it was just pitched down versions of other drum samples that I was able to choose from. I liked how it sounded, and so I tossed them, kind of sprinkled the sounds throughout the song to just keep things from being repetitive and to just add variance throughout the whole song, because I like to make sure that things aren't too samey. I think this song is fairly simple, but I'm okay with that because it's a part of my past as a wide-eyed musician, and I simply was more interested in starting than I was in making something outstanding. I was super eager in just starting to create, and so I think the musical naivety in the song is what makes it so special to me.